Okay, this is the Planning and Zoning Board meeting of April 11th, 2022. Sherry, would you take the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes, here.
Mr. Horian?
Here.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
Mr. DeLonge is excused, and so are the two alternates.
Okay, so it's just us people.
Quality.
Qualities here. Minutes of the March 14th, 2022 meeting.
Make
Do
a
I have a
motion.
motion to approve?
Make a motion to.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item is the quasi judicial hearing for zoning variance. John, do you read this?
I could if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
Okay. Find what page it's on. Sherry, do you have the, oh, no, so this is the variance, so there's nothing to read. It's only for an ordinance that I would,
Oh, on the next one.
yeah.
Okay. So the hearing is being opened for zoning variance ZV 12022-008, Blue Coast Shop Rebuild at 3110 South Atlantic Avenue. First off, are there any ex parte communications between any of the members?
Yes, not between the members, but I did have a text message from Shannon, and I just wanted to clear that.
Okay. But you have no financial interest in
No,
this?
nothing.
That's perfect. Anyone else? Staff presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Stuart Cruz, City Planner with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. And this is zone variance application ZV 12022-008, and the subject address is 3110 South Atlantic Avenue. The applicant owner is 9940 LLC, Shannon Burke. The property size is about 0.12 of an acre, just over a tenth, and the dimensions are 50 by 100 or 5,000 square feet. The property zoning is GC1, which is our tourist-oriented commercial district. The future land use is the same, which is our tourist-oriented commercial future land use category. And currently, there is no land use that's being utilized on the property at this moment. And the reason for that, as everyone here probably knows, is that in the summer of 2020, there was a major fire event that occurred, which essentially forced the demolition of the majority of the structure. With regards to the pre-fire status of the structure, it was a non-conforming structure built in 1956 prior to the establishment of the zoning district and the land development code requirements. And the use on the property was a Blue Coast retail shop retail shop or store. There also was, and I don't have this in the staff report or in the presentation, there also was a conditional use permit that ran with the use of the business, and that conditional use permit allowed for what we call the live-work situation, in which the owner of the business could actually reside on top of the business, providing that certain requirements are met. The owner's intent is to rebuild the structure in the previous footprint, which would be similar with the site improvements that were there previously, and reinstitute the business as it was prior. So everyone here probably knows or is familiar with the non-conforming rebuild rule with regards to the city's land development code, which is in section 1411.3.2 of the code, which basically says that whenever you rebuild a property, it's been destroyed by 50% or more of the fair market value of the structure at the time of destruction, regardless of what caused the destruction. It could be a hurricane, fire, whatever have you. You have to rebuild the property in conformity with the existing rules of the day. So, considering that, staff has had several meetings with the contractor representing the applicant, and over the course of the last 2 years since the fire, a site plan was developed. The site plan was submitted to the city earlier this year, and staff did an analysis, which we typically do for any development, and there were 5 deficiencies that were noticed. And the first one, as you can see in this table, was that the setback, if you look in the left column, I'm sorry, the column to the right. There was the proposed setback on the west side of the property, which is adjacent to Liberty Street, that was being proposed was 14.5 feet. Whereas if you look in the middle column, the requirement is 20 feet. And if you go down the middle column, you can actually see the different deficiencies in the site plan that was provided to the city, and the staff has identified those. And essentially, with regards to the landscaping deficiencies, which are, from 2 to 5, you'll notice that the proposed variance request is to essentially not meet or install to the required standard. So with regards to due public notice requirements, that's in section 2-2 of our code and other sections of our code. All of those have been met and submitted for the record. The Community Service Department staff essentially has reviewed the application. And we're here today for this purpose. So I'll just give a brief overview of the property. So as everyone knows, if we're here at the community center on Bellmead Drive, it's essentially about a 10-minute walk if you go along Atlantic Avenue. It's basically just under half a mile from here along A1A. This is a pre-fire aerial view of the property. You can see it's just north of the Shaggy Dog groomer facility. The property fronts A1A and Liberty Street to the west. And it's just across from the Tropic Shores Resort. And to the north of the property is actually Tropic Shores Overflow Parking. So these are pre-fire street views. The first one on the left is the one from A1A, and the one on the right is the view from Liberty Street. So a lot of people don't actually know this, but when you look at the property from the west view, a lot of these properties, they're actually 3 stories. But when you look from A1A, it looks like it's only 2 stories. And that's because of the grade of the property, the slope of the property. So the post-fire view, this is the best I could have done, but essentially from South Atlantic Avenue, you can't see anything. And from Liberty Street, you can see that essentially there's a shell of what was there before. So as I mentioned earlier, the zoning for this property is GC1, which is our tourist-oriented commercial district, and this is the variance site right here. And the color that represents is GC1, as I just mentioned. In the GC1 district, the setback requirements for front yards are 20 feet. And essentially, a front yard is any yard extended between side lot lines across the front of an adjoining public street. And so as I mentioned earlier, what's being proposed is actually 14.5 feet. So there is a variation of 5.5 feet, and that's what the first variance request is for. So this is a proposed site plan that was provided by the applicant. And what you can see is this is the way it was before, and this is exactly the way it's being proposed now. So you see the building footprint, or the building core in the center. There's going to be an overhang balcony. You can see landscaping, and then just east of that, you have the parking spaces, and then if you continue more, that's South Atlantic Avenue. To the west side of the property, you can see as a result of the shape of the property and the way the property is right now with regards to the previous building footprint and what's being proposed, you can see the 14.5-foot setback that's being provided adjacent to Liberty. This is a proposed elevation. The one to the left is from South Atlantic Avenue, and the one to the right is from Liberty Street. So the first criteria, and board members, you may recall that there's 7 criteria that the code establishes that the board should use in terms of determining whether or not a variance is approved. And the first one is that special conditions or circumstances unique to the property exist. So I have a summary of what the applicant put in the middle column here, and essentially, or what the applicant is asserting. And the first is that the property lot is only 50 by 100, which gives us 5,000 square feet. The GC1 district requires a minimum lot area of 7,500 square feet and a minimum lot width of 65 feet, and therefore presumes dimensions of 65 by 115. So to meet all those land development standards, the lot would have to be 15 feet wider and 15 feet deeper. This is what the applicant is asserting. And if you look in the column to the right, staff concurs with the applicant's analysis of the special circumstances. In other words, we agree with the facts that the applicant has put forward. In addition, staff has surveyed lots in the GC1 district in the vicinity of the property, and essentially it's almost 1,000 feet, so basically from Van Avenue all the way down to the Driving Christian Church on the west side. Staff looked at all those properties, and what staff has determined is that the subject lot is actually 5,146 square feet less in area than all these other lots when you take the average. It's also 42 feet narrower than all these properties when you take the average of the width of those properties. And it's also 9 feet shorter, or shorter than the depth of the property in that area that staff surveyed. So staff has concluded that there are special circumstances that exist to the property and that these circumstances are unique to the property in that vicinity in the same zoning district. The second condition or criteria that has to be met is that special conditions or circumstances are not self-imposed or primarily economic or financial in nature. So the applicant's response is that the variances are necessary due to the 2020 fire and need to rebuild the structure to prior dimensions. So when staff dug a little bit more deeply and found some more facts, what staff concluded was that the lot was actually platted or subdivided back in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And the code, as we all know, was actually established in the 1990s. And the owner purchased the property in 2015. So as a result of those facts and the chronology of the way these events happened, staff has concluded that the circumstances, the special circumstances, are not self-imposed or financial in nature. The third criterion is that literal interpretation or enforcement would deprive the applicants of zoning entitlements. The applicant's response is that lot dimensions creates unavoidable challenges to construction without variance relief. Staff concurs with that analysis, and staff goes further to say that the subject lot does not meet the minimum district lot dimensions and therefore cannot reasonably be developed consistent with the prescribed development standards of today as other lots can in the same zoning district. So basically, because of the size, the dimensions, the area of the property, the property cannot be developed as if you were to take one of those properties to the north-south of this property and develop it the same way. So because those other properties are wider, they're deeper, they have more area, they can develop consistent with the codes that we have today, whereas this property, because it's constricted, because it's restrained in terms of dimensions and area, they're at a disadvantage. Does that make sense? Or that property is at a disadvantage, I should say. So the application of the land development code as is would deprive the applicant of the entitlements that other properties can take advantage of today in the same zoning district. So I just did a brief illustration of, and this is not to scale, but I did a brief illustration of what the property would actually kind of look like if it was platted today or subdivided today. And what you see here to the right and to the bottom, you'll see additional area that would actually be added. So if we were to just take that entire area right now, if we were to plat this property, the 3110 property, this is additional area that the property would have more or less in order to develop and actually meet the city's codes. So you would see to the bottom, there would be an additional 15 feet, and to the west, to the south, more or less, there would be an additional 15 feet. And so that would enable the property to put in the 5-foot landscaping buffer. It would allow the property to meet the 20-foot setback in the back and the other requirements or the other deficiencies that staff identified in the site plan review. So what the other properties have is they have more or less this additional area. Actually, they actually have more than this additional area that you're seeing here. And that's the reason why this property is unique. So I'm not going to get into all the other criteria, but essentially the other criteria is that it's the variance is the minimum that's being applied for is the minimum needed, and it will not authorize or extend nonconformities, and it is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the code, and with the comprehensive plan. So the applicant's response was yes, and staff concurs with all those assertions. And so you've seen this table probably a million times. This is a variance authorization criteria summary in section 1463.8A of the code. And essentially, all the criteria that is outlined in the code, have to be met in order for the board to provide a to essentially grant a variance. And staff feels, in our professional opinion, that all those criteria are met, and as such, staff is recommending approval of the application as presented. And at the time of the write-in of the staff report that you have before you, board members, there were over 30 emails and letters of support from the clients, from previous clients, and the community at large supporting granting this variance. And I think a few of them may want to speak today. Since the writing of this staff report that you see before you, I think we've gotten an additional 10 to 15 emails with letters of support. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. And I'm sure there's some other folks here who might be eager to share their piece as well. Yes, sir.
Did you find out the cause of the fire?
I'll leave that up to the applicant to speak.
Okay. Are they gonna have to tear down those 4 garages on the Liberty side?
I'll leave that up to the applicant to speak, but, my understanding is that they're going through a permanent process as well to ensure that, all the current codes, whether it's land development code, fire, building, all those codes are going to be met.
Thank you.
Stuart, I have a question. One of your comments was about the size of the lot and everything compared to everything around it. And so there was a property on it. We want to rebuild that, same thing. If this was just the empty lot, smaller than all the rest, and they were coming in to ask for a building on it, different people, not the old people, would we still go through all these variance requests? Because we're kind of looking at it as somebody that had been there and wants to go back on it versus what would happen if it was an empty lot and started over.
So the way staff analyzes variances is based on the facts of the actual property, the case itself, and not necessarily with regards to the ownership or the previous use. So to answer your question specifically, if it was a vacant lot, the applicant could try to design it to meet the code, but whether or not it would be functional is a different question. If the property owner in their own mind felt that it wouldn't be functional with regards to meeting all the codes. In other words, the property would, the core of the building would be too small. They wouldn't be able to get enough parking on site. My guess is that because of the nature of the property being a constrained property, it's smaller than normal property with regards to the setbacks and all the other requirements that we have in the city for this zoning district. My guess is that that owner would be before this board asking for very similar variances as well.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty cut and dried, you did a good job, and
Thank you.
I think it's only fair.
Any comments, Jeff?
Nope.
Okay, we will go to applicant presentation.
Good morning. For the record, Michael Woods with the law firm Cobb Cole, 231 North Woodland Boulevard over in DeLand. And very, very happy to be here today before you to discuss this matter. It's been a long time coming. We're very happy to be able to present this information to you. Normally when I approach a board like this on a matter of a variance, sometimes we're talking about sheds and setbacks of this or that. But today is a very good opportunity for this board and for the variance process to really be put to the use that's kind of intended when you put in a variance process into the system. Trying to give relief to allow for functional business operation and to address when a general code provision, i.e. the zoning category that's on this parcel, makes other assumptions that are not present right now. The main theme here is the undersized lot. It's okay that this property is zoned what it is. It makes a lot of sense. You have consistent zoning throughout the area. But then when you try to apply particularly these dimensional standards, it becomes very difficult. And to your point, sir, with a brand new project coming in, to be able to comply with all the standards of the GC1 on the smaller lot. Really, 15 feet on either side may not seem like a lot, but you can see in the application it makes all the difference in the world. I am today here on behalf of 9940, and obviously Shannon Burke, if you're familiar with her story and the history of the property, and Mr. Lilly, to your point, the Blue Coast store itself opened up in 2012, and Shannon and Mark purchased it back in 2015 and utilized it both as their business and as their home. As I'm sure you may be aware, in 2020, Mark had passed away in June. This fire broke out less than 30 days from that, and that was the result of a lithium battery, first thing, because they do the motorbike rental, kayak rentals and the like, so one of the lithium batteries burst into flames and caused the damage that it did. So, that was back in July of 2020, and obviously this is a process to move forward. And it's a process that's doubly challenging because we were dealing with a pandemic at the same time. And also a little bit of concern is as you go through the process of reconstruction, what has the building industry been doing? It's just been going outrageously crazy. So we are here as fast as we can to have a design and a layout that works out to the best to be able to incorporate the insurance and everything else to rebuild and get Shannon back into the business and into the dwelling. Herman Stoll's here with Stoll Construction, and he has been working diligently since prior to demolition of getting this project underway. And to your point, he will be, we have to establish what our footprints are allowed and get our variance in place, and then obviously everything moving forward gets built absolutely to building code from health, safety, welfare perspective. This is more about elbow room and understanding what exactly is going to be expected by the city of Irving Constructs. The structure fits in the prior footprint. Obviously, it'd be an improved structure with more modern facilities and the like, but from the exterior perspective, it's pretty much the same. A little bit upgraded landscape compared to what was there before, but obviously we don't hit all the criteria that you have for you. I thought the staff report did an excellent job outlining, the criteria and the variance process, and we've worked very hard to kind of hew that down and make sure what we're asking for is the minimum of what we're dealing with. But it really, and I'm happy to go through each of the variance criteria if you have any questions, but this really, I kind of felt like I was going back to law school. This is really that situation of, gee, if we only had a few more feet in either direction, right? This is a property, it's already small, and you've got double frontage. So you've got setbacks of a front yard requirement on both sides. So the request there is to address that liberty setback. A lot have been 15 feet deeper. Now, we can't do that without vacating either Liberty or A1A, neither of which is going to be a likely outcome. So we work within the dimensions that we have, and that's what ends up impacting and requiring the variances that apply to the west side property or west boundary and eastern boundary. So that's both the setbacks and then even having the space for the landscaping aisle in between A1A. That's not just a matter of depth, but then the maneuverability of the vehicles on the site. Similarly, we would love to have been able to go a little bit more elbow room to the north or to the south, both of those being owned by other parties. And Stuart's exhibit there showing just what you could do with the extra 15 feet. You do have landscaping in the vicinity of the parking area, and your code provision would typically, it's easy to apply in a larger track where you basically are having a long run of parking spaces, then you have the end caps for the landscaping. That's really what those intentions are there for. Obviously, you can look at the site plan, and we've got the bare minimum. It's the parking that was there before, but no one would say that this is an overparked location in lieu of having the landscaping. And then we're just basically dealing with very close setback lines, and so there is still landscaped areas on there, and you can look through the side plan. So it's not going to be completely barren of landscaping, but it doesn't meet what that requirement would otherwise require. Like I said, I'm happy to go through any of the questions you may have. This is one of those days. It's nice to come out at 8:30 in the morning. I know you guys work very hard. These are one of those variance requests that you can feel good about. Like this meets the purpose and intent square down the middle. I'm sure there are some folks that may speak to it as well. But happy to answer any questions. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
No.
Thank you. Before we call for public input, we will recognize that we had all those emails and support, and probably a lot of the public in support. What we'd like to do to avoid redundancy, and because so far we've had a lot of the same issues brought up in support of it. So in the interest of time and redundancy, if you all have the same comment, we'd like to just hear it basically once. If you have different comments, that's fine. But, so we're going to call for public input in favor of the project first. And then second, we would call public input opposed to the project. So those in favor of, if somebody wants to come up and be the first.
Actually, everybody could just stand.
Stand up.
Actually, everybody could just stand. That's what he's asking them to do. That's enough.
Fair to say ditto? What you said before?
That's fine. Thank you.
Out of expedience.
Match all the emails. In fact, some of the emails may have been from you guys. Appreciate that. So do we have any input opposed? You raise your hand back there. Would you like to speak in favor of?
Speak in favor.
Okay, come on forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Holmes. Good morning. 103 Van Avenue, right here. I want to say that my family moved to Volusia County in 1886. I brought my son here today. He's the sixth generation that's being raised here in the Shores. We were beyond thrilled when Mark and Shannon opened Blue Coast. It not only has served our family, but the many visitors. Of course, you own a place at the beach, they will come. But particularly, it has been an invaluable resource to every one of these hotels and condominiums and their visitors throughout the year. I think that they also have filled such an incredible void. Daytona Beach has Salty Dog and Maui Nix, and New Smyrna has Red Dog. Well, we have Blue Coast. I know that the Shores have worked very hard to carve out our own. We all have worked very hard to help maintain our identity in the Shores here, our own unique place. Life is better here, and it's because of businesses like Blue Coast and Millie's and Victoria's, and on a larger scale, the Shores Resort and Spa. I would argue that we need Blue Coast, and in their absence and in the place of an empty lot, I'd also argue that what we don't need are more vape shops and massage parlors and dispensaries. They are a family-centered business, and we are very, very grateful to have them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's one person. So,
As far as an applicant presentation, does the contractor wish to speak to the board?
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to
Would
answer.
you come forward, state your name and address, and
Herman Stoll Construction, 1686 North Stone Street, Milan, Florida. I also happen to own the building, 3114 South Atlantic Avenue, since '71. I've been a Shores member myself for quite a few years. We've worked hard to come up with a buildable plan that meets and exceeds all the code requirements as far as safety, wind, and use go, to try and replicate what was there, but make it new. So if there's any other questions you had, I can go to detail.
I imagine you've inspected the property pretty thoroughly.
From the beginning, yes, sir.
You anticipate any problems?
No, none that we can't overcome.
What about your timeline?
We'll get started as soon as we
6
get.
months, 8 months?
Because of the length of material that it's taking now, it's gonna be at least 12 months to do something like that. Just as an example, the day I order the windows, they're 6 months out. You know, so that just gives you a simple snippet of what we're dealing with nowadays. It's not like the old days, you can get stuff in 30 days. So.
now it seemed like, I remember reading somewhere in all this, that part of the foundation is going to be kept
Correct.
salvageable.
What's there right now, which is the, if you want to start from Liberty side, you've got the garages and the complete shell of that, including the poured concrete ceiling of the garage, which is the floor of the retail location. We're utilizing all of that. It's still in place and structurally sound. There are no issues with it. We are fortifying it with some additional steel and downpours so we can meet the CLP, the continuous load path, from the foundation all the way up to the roof deck. So that's all part of the blueprints that we've submitted to the city.
There'll be just a single apartment above?
Correct.
Retail?
One apartment, and just for Shannon, excuse me, with a balcony over the front. Very similar to what was there, but built all out of concrete, and again, more substantial than the original structure.
Okay. This probably doesn't apply to this hearing, but I just want to ask, if a lithium ion caused the fire the first time, what can happen, because those are notorious for doing that, which is why airplanes don't let you have them. What will happen to keep that from happening again?
I can't speak to what would prevent a lithium-ion battery from having another spontaneous thermal event, as the insurance company called it. I know that Shannon follows all the safe practices. This was a very unusual event in that we actually have video footage showing that battery not in function, not under charge, just laying out by itself, and it spontaneously burst. It's one of those things that, you know, it's like, call it an act of God or just a misrepresentation, but batteries have a way of, spontaneously erupting. I don't know that we can do more other than the fact that the new structure will be more fire sound than the last one.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
If I could just add to that, the e-bikes are going away.
No longer, there are no more e-bikes.
They've learned, so that's just not the route they're going to take, so.
Good. Any other questions of the contractor or the applicant? Thank you, appreciate it. In that case, we will close the hearing. Is there any discussion between the board members?
Well, I think having a business there is very, very important. We don't want another empty lot in the shores. And just because it's, you know, the lot is too small, I think the building was there before. And, you know, it worked okay. And I didn't hear of any problems before, so I don't foresee any problems going forward.
Thanks. Any other discussion?
Well, I've been going by that building for over 45 years. And,
You're that old.
okay. I was a toddler.
Oh, okay.
I was really disheartened when I saw it burn down, as I know people were, and then find out the repercussions from that. I wholeheartedly agree with my council member down there that there's certain businesses that this city's just not attuned to. And this is one of them that they are attuned to. And that lady back there hit it. It's a plus, it's a positive. And I have never been to a board, and I've been on this board for many, many years. I've never seen such an outpour of positive show-ups to support something. Usually it's negative. This is fantastic. And I appreciate y'all coming and showing your support. Thanks.
I would agree with that, Jim. Normally, this would be opposition. And that might be in favor over there. But yeah, it's good to see people show up when they're in favor of something. In that case, can we have a motion?
I move to approve variance ZV 1202-2008 as presented.
Second.
Second. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Horian,
Yes.
Ms. Tornatori,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly.
Definitely. Y'all can stick around.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Whoops, I'm sorry. They didn't want to stand there and look at all that stuff all day long.
I was armed.
We all were, we all had our speech ready. I wish I had said.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to probably cry anyway.
Can I have them in there? Wait, oh, thank you so much.
What a great turnout, huh?
Maybe Nucky? So now I need to congregate in the hallway. Yes.
All right, next order for us.
I need to go out in the hall.
John, you read the ordinance, please, on the next. Please take that outside.
Thank you.
This is ordinance 2022-11.
You're happy.
And now the work begins.
City of Daytona Beach, Shores, Florida, relating to freestanding signs, amending the municipal code ordinances, land development, amending appendix amending chapter 6 entitled Signs and Advertising, by amending section 6-7 entitled Removal of Abandoned, Deteriorated, or Other Non-Conforming Signs, to extend the amortization period for non-conforming ground-and-pole signs, providing for enforcement and penalties, providing for a savings provision, providing for computation, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
What was that?
Most of us have read it before, so.
Did the microphone pick it up? Yes. We've got it on the record, though. It looks that.
Funny.
All right, do we have any discussion? Staff, would you like to talk about it?
Well, this is, again, this is Stuart Cruz with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. So this is quite self-explanatory. If you look at the staff report, you'll see that on March 8th of this year, the City Council, through a voice vote, essentially elected to move forward with giving and granting a one-year extension of non-conforming monument sign, non-conforming ground and pole signs. So board members, just quick history, you may recall in 2012, the city adopted an ordinance, what we call the monument sign ordinance, which basically outlawed pole signs, ground signs, essentially all these elevated signs. And in return, what the ordinance did was that since those are outlawed, the only signs that would be permitted now are these monument-style signs. So in that ordinance, the property owners had the ability to basically fix their signs and essentially have a 10-year period, we call it an amortization period, to essentially get rid of the sign and come into conformity with the new monument sign regulations. Well, you may recall in 2017-18 we had 2 storms, and just recently, I think everybody is still familiar with the pandemic, and because of that, staff approached council to bring forth an effort to grant a 1-year extension. And the reason for that, as I mentioned, is there were issues with the economy. The City Council considered the impacts of the pandemic, which includes, as the contractor just mentioned, just lead times in terms of getting supply. The economy was essentially shut down for almost a year or more. And so all those things impacted little businesses, local businesses, and national businesses for that matter. And as such, the City Council elected to go ahead and adopt and first read into the last City Council meeting this ordinance 2022-11, which would actually grant the extension of the non-conforming freestanding signs. So just to be clear, if this ordinance is adopted, property owners who have signs will be able to maintain their signs and repair their signs, but they can't do it in such a way that it would increase the nonconformity. So you can have, if you have to change some bolts, if you have to change, a damaged copy or whatever have you, under this ordinance, you'd be able to do this throughout the course of this additional year. However, at the end of this year, this 1-year extension, essentially all those signs are going to have to be removed. If not, they'll be found inconsistent with the regulations, and they'll have to go through the city's code enforcement process. So this particular ordinance would actually amend section 6-7.1 of the Land Development Code. And it's fairly simple, as I mentioned. One other thing that I want to mention, it doesn't really have much to do with what we're doing right now, but just so you can understand the context, in 2012, when the city adopted the Monument Sign Ordinance, it also adopted later that year a grant program to help assist property owners and sign owners with the cost of replacing those older signs, non-conforming signs, and installing new monument signs. Well, the City Council have on their agenda tomorrow night to extend, or not to extend, but to reinstitute, because it actually terminated about a year ago, I believe the last fiscal year, a similar grant program. We don't know the details of the amount of money that the City Council will approve, but essentially the format will be the same, and the goal will be the same in the sense that the City Council and the city wants to assist these property owners, through this difficult time, to give them the opportunity to remove the signs within this 1-year period through the grant program as well. So if there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those.
I'm just wondering why the initial, in 2012, why did it take, or why did we grant 10 years? It doesn't take 10 years to remove a sign.
Yes, so generally whenever it comes to, and John, the city attorney can speak to this a little bit more than I can, but generally whenever a code amendment is made to any type of improvement that you have, and that there's a mandate by the city to remove that improvement, a physical improvement, there's a certain level of investment that these local businesses have made or the property owner has made. And so to be fair, local governments, counties generally try to give a period for them to recoup their investment and to come up with the money to essentially have or pay for that removal and the new improvement that's being requested. So the standard is generally about 10 years. Based on the research that staff did in 2011 throughout the country. Some of them are actually 20 years, and some of them are actually shorter as well, but the ones that are shorter are the ones that typically get a lot of challenges from local property owners and businesses. So to be fair, staff recommended and the City Council approved in 2012 that 10-year amortization period, just to be considerate, because, you know, especially here in Daytona Beach Shores, where businesses, you know, go up and down based on the season, and we have storms, and we have all these other external factors that influence the local economy, you know, the city just felt that 10 years was the appropriate time.
There's an additional legal reason for that as
Yes.
well. If you have a regulation that requires them to change, that can amount to a regulatory taking, which means the city that would then be liable to pay for the just compensation for that taking, which might put the city on the hook. Now, we have case law out of one of our district courts of appeal that has basically said that 10 years is an adequate amortization period to nullify the taking. So if you do less than 10 years, you run the risk of a court saying, city, you have to pay for it because this isn't taking. But since 10 years has been okayed by the District Court of Appeal, that's, I'm sure, what the city went into the city's thought process for the 10-year period.
Okay.
So that one variance that's in the pipeline that you talked about last meeting, they can just do away with that?
So the Holiday Inn, okay, so what they have, so they applied for the variance because the deadline to meet the code at the time was April 9th. But now we have legislation in process or progress that we're going through, in which we're trying to grant them an additional year to get rid of that sign. So if this ordinance is not adopted, or if we did not start this process, then they would have been in the same shoe as everybody else who have a sign that didn't meet the April 9th deadline. And so within the next week, you know, they would have received a letter from code enforcement that's basically saying, look, you gotta, you know, get rid of the sign, you have X amount of days, or else you're gonna be before the magistrate.
And that applies to the one that was in the pipeline, because I asked you how many are there, and you said there's one other, so.
Oh, okay, now I recall, yes. So you're not referring to the Holiday Inn, you're referring to the other one. So the other one was an administrative variance. It would apply to them as well, yes. So basically, any sign that is non-conforming in this city with regards to the monument sign ordinance, if this ordinance is actually adopted tomorrow night, they will have the 1-year extension or period to bring their sign into into conformity.
I can see people coming to us a year from now,
Yeah.
bitching and complaining. I mean, yeah, this is not going to solve anything. The penalty for not doing this within a year is no big deal. You know, they just come in here and
Letter from code enforcement.
that's it. I think they should be fined daily.
So
All these other businesses hit it.
yes. So you're absolutely correct. So, but the last few years, you know, and this is the reason why staff bring it up, the last few years because of the pandemic, you know, because there were people who actually had the intent to actually, you know, bring their sign into conformity. And after the sign grant program expired about a year ago, we actually received other applications and lots of other interest from different property owners wanting to bring their sign up to code. So we do know that there will be some slackers, but those slackers will go through the process, and if they're found or fined by the special magistrate, then they will be incurring, you know, the daily fines as you're referring to.
Who is that special magistrate?
At this point.
Is that you?
No.
It's an attorney here in town that used to be a judge. His name's Stephen Delaroche.
Fine, okay.
Yeah, and he serves as a special magistrate. So basically, once the 1-year period ends, anybody that hasn't come into compliance, our code enforcement officer, Gwen, will be sending them a letter saying you need to get in compliance, and then setting a hearing date. And once the special magistrate finds that they are in violation, he can fine them up to $250 a day. But they do have a legal process to go through before we can do that. We can't just sua sponte, impose a fine. It has to go through the special magistrate, who's a neutral person who's not employed by the city, who can look at the facts and determine if there's a violation.
So one thing I did want to mention is that if the city approves this ordinance and the grant program, within the next week or so, staff will be sending out a letter to all these different property owners who still have these non-conforming signs, and essentially, you know, letting them know that there is a 1-year extension, but we have a grant program, and the grant program will terminate concurrently with this extension, and that they essentially need to get their application in or need to do something about their sign, because after that period or deadline, the city council, to my understanding, you know, has no intention to grant an additional extension, and so they'll have to go through the special magistrate process, the code enforcement process, and we'll essentially outline what those consequences are in that letter.
So what's the proposed subsidy for these people?
As I mentioned, that's going before the city council tomorrow night, and I'm not certain what the city council will approve.
Last question. What are those three grandfathered in signs again?
The three well, you have good memory. You remember there were three. So the Akwatiki, Best Western sign, you know, the one with the big.
Tiki, yeah.
Akwatiki, is that what it's called? Is that actually what it's called?
Akwatiki, right.
Yes. So that, the Sun Viking and the Oceans Homeowners Association, the signs that you see out here in Oceans West and at South Atlantic Avenue, those are the three because of the, you know, the impact and the importance that they have in
Cultural experience.
Cultural, yes, importance.
Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome.
So if I read this right, less than half have chosen to take advantage of this and let's just forget the couple-year pandemic. So the 8 years before that, they chose just to
Right.
pretty much ignore this, even though there was grant money out there to help them.
Yes, and if at the end of this one-year period, they continue to ignore it, they will not ignore it when they start getting letters and fines from the city. At least I wouldn't.
They will.
They will. If they went 8 years without worrying about it, well, we're going to have some special magistrate stuff coming up, which costs the city money to have. Any other discussion with board members on this ordinance? If not, Sherry, would you take, oh, we need a motion, I'm sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2022-11
Thank you.
as presented.
Second?
Sherry, would you take roll?
Yes. Mrs. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
No.
And the final agenda item is nomination of chair and vice chair for the coming year.
May I ask a couple questions of our attorney?
You may.
Okay. I have been on this planning board for 14 years. So my question stems from, I've been the chair, I've been the vice chair for how many years now? 2 years?
2 or 3.
Okay. What is the rule? What are we supposed to be doing? I mean, can we have a chair 2 terms? How many terms for a vice chair? I asked Sherry, and she doesn't know about the vice chair. So I need to know
I know
that
there's
we're
some
doing
rules
the
made.
right thing,
But I
John,
don't know what they were.
So I
before we vote, you know.
We'll be completely transparent with you. I saw the agenda, but I didn't look up the code provision about the chairman, and I probably should have before the meeting. But why don't you give me a minute just to make sure I don't give you poor advice?
Music.
Unless Stuart knows it right off the top of his head.
I don't think it speaks to it, but you can confirm.
And
Where do these come from?
From me, when we board comments, I'm going to make a couple of points about signs and things.
yeah, so it looks like the ordinance is silent as to this. There are no term limits. So it's a majority of the vote of the board to elect a chair and a vice chair. And you can re-elect the same chair and vice chair, or you can elect different chair and vice chair.
However many terms
Well, for this term.
for
You
this.
vote for each term, and every year you would come back and have another vote, so that it's not a permanent position. It would be for the next year.
So you vote
But
every year for a new chair?
I'm still confused, though. How many years can a chair have terms? And how many years can a vice chair have terms?
It's elected each year so that for the following year.
So it doesn't matter. We can be on forever.
I mean, you all serve at the
my-
pleasure of the city council, but barring that, yeah.
You and I have been on this for a long
Pardon
time.
me, though. Sherry, didn't you tell me that it was, there was a limit on the
I
chair?
could swear there was under
Yeah,
the
and-
new rules from a year ago.
There was, it was within the, and I was trying to pull it up, but it's not letting me get to my server.
It seems like 2 years ago,
That's why
We did a board reorganization.
Yes.
Prior to your firm coming, John.
Okay.
We cut from 7 down to 5, and during that time, I thought we put a term limit.
That's why I moved over.
2018, 2019,
Okay.
and I said, I can't get to my server.
Okay, we'll just.
I thought it was 2 years.
That's my recollection.
Yeah,
And I want to say a chair can run for 2 terms.
Yeah.
So, okay.
should we table this until we find out for sure?
No, I can find it
Good
real
idea.
quick. I do remember now talking to Stuart about that ordinance, which was passed before
Why
we
don't you table it from?
started here.
He's not clear.
I think we should table this until
Okay,
the next
so
one.
if that's what you want to do, that's fine, and then I can research it and let you know
We have a motion.
next month.
I make a motion that we table this issue till the next meeting.
Second.
To give us time to look at the law and see what,
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
And to have more people here so we can see who's interested.
Bring that crowd back.
Oh, we don't care who's interested, we just nominate them.
I do have a couple of things I want.
Okay, board comments?
Okay. I was at the Red Lobster yesterday at 2 o'clock. The Make-A-Wish Foundation was outside getting people to be involved to help the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And there was a thing where you could spend whatever for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and the Red Lobster was doing this. Keeping in mind that there are so many signs in the shores for realtors and for sale and this and that, and the code enforcement officer came and kicked everybody out. So I just want to say that something's wrong with this picture, the way I feel. They should have been able to continue their day, and then they could have been told they needed $30 to get the Make-A-Wish Foundation there. The Red Lobster pays $18,000 a month for their rent, and for 5 months of the year, they lose money, okay? We don't want to lose the Red Lobster. All I'm saying is it could have been handled in a different way. And there were tons of kids and people, they were outside trying to, get a little attention and so forth. And I'm just saying that as I did call the mayor, and she's aware of this, and I just want to let you know that.
But who showed up as far as code?
The code enforcement officer, some Kathleen or something other, she made Thalia get rid of everybody or
We don't
something.
have anyone named Kathleen.
Okay, well, I got the name wrong then, maybe. But if you call the Red Lobster,
I'll take a look.
the lady said she worked for the city.
I never even heard of it.
I'll take a look at it, and I think what we'll do is we'll probably do maybe a special notice to property owners, to businesses, to let them know that, to give us a heads up as to whenever they do this, so we can walk them through the process.
Okay, because she was very hurt and everything, and, all these kids were
Yeah.
Make-A-Wish
Because you can do a
Make-A-Wish
special permit,
Foundation.
can't you?
I'm sorry?
You can do a special permit for an
Yes, and
event.
that's what I'm saying, we can do some sort of a public outreach in which people become aware of what the regulations are and what type of permits you need, so that they can do this in advance, so that a circumstance like this doesn't happen.
Yeah, she said it was like $30 for a 30-day permit, but you could only do that permit once a year. I mean, should we check into this a little bit, and what kind of permits? Because this,
I'll take a look at it so that I can get the facts of the case. If it was indeed our staff that went out there, I'll get the facts from them,
Thank you.
and we'll try to do a public outreach program.
and I have some little tickets. If you spend $40, you get $10 off. I'm giving out the tickets because I
Give
gave
one to Stuart.
$100. Here's Stuart.
We've got him.
I'll get it after the meeting.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I don't want Red Lobster to leave us.
Red Lobster, yeah.
We gotta wait till May 1st,
$18,000 a month they spend in rent.
so don't go
I
back.
thought Red Lobster owned that property.
No, they rent.
Well, Red Lobster split up too, that's true.
Anybody else?
Any other board comments? Nope.
Well, I do have one more thing. One more thing. How come all these realtors have signs outside and everything without paying and everything like that? I mean, you know, I'm a realtor, so, but I see signs all the time for rent, for sale, for this, for that, and right next door in that same building.
So, a property owner can actually have a real estate sign on their property. Now, if they want to have it in the right-of-way, you know, that's a different issue. Are you referring to real estate signs in the right-of-way or on their property?
Outside in the street. Mhm.
Their own? Okay, so this is...
No, well,
In the
no.
right-of-way?
No, in the right, you know, in the.
Grass area.
Grass area.
Okay, so if the grass area is their property, they can have a real estate sign.
It's the city property.
Oh, the city property you're referring to. Okay, so those would probably...
No, I mean, it belongs to the, I mean, it's
Right-of-way.
DOT, it's right away.
Okay, so the right-of-way. So
I mean, they're all over the place on Sundays.
We have a program in which they could actually enroll and actually utilize city real estate signs, if you want to call it that. But sometimes the real estate industry, you know, they're not, especially the newer ones, you know, I mean, you know, you're in the business, you know, we get real estate agents almost every day. The vast majority of them, you know, go through these crash courses and they're not really familiar with local ordinances, you know, but we do our best, you know, to inform the overarching real estate agencies to let them know what our regulations are. But sometimes, you know, they don't pass it down, unfortunately, to the newer guys. And so I think that's part of the problem. So we will continue to try to step up our efforts to let these, you know, larger real estate agencies know what the rules are and pass those rules down to their newer guys, because it's the newer guys, unfortunately, who typically, you know, aren't aware of what the city ordinances are. But we do have a program in which they can do that, but they have to enroll and they have to utilize the city signs to post in the right-of-way.
And the zoning officer can learn that too, because
It's actually our
right next door
officer
to,
that actually, you know, manages that program.
they were right next door to the Red Lobster, so, you know.
Thank you.
Rump.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me,
Rump.
I mean, it,
I'm sorry?
Yeah,
very important. Rump.
rump.
Any other comments?
Well, regarding the Red Lobster, I just want to add, I'm president of the Greater Daytona Shrines Club, and we hold our meetings there once a month, and we're supporting them very, very strongly. And so we're giving a lot of support to the Red Lobster.
So I just want to clarify, I just got a text message from our code enforcement officer who's streaming live. You guys can wave.
Hello.
Oh, they're watching us.
Saw me yesterday.
Yes. You know, you're out there in the world. It was not her.
Oh.
So we'll do some investigation and try to figure out what happened. We'll call Dahlia and try to figure out exactly what happened. But there is, as I mentioned earlier, there is a process, there is a permit that they could have gotten to essentially, you know, do what they're planning to do or what they did over the weekend. So I'll look at the facts of the case. Unfortunately, when you hear information, you know, and then I hear it, you know how the thing goes, right? Sometimes the information is not always accurate.
Thalia will let you know who it was.
I'm sure.
I mean,
I'm sure
It was Karen.
I tell you if you're looking.
It was Karen.
Karen?
Karen is the acronym for anybody who bitches and complains.
Oh, excuse me.
And the guy's name is Kent.
Okay, thank you,
Well,
Stuart.
Barbie, okay.
Are we done?
That being all the comments, we will adjourn this meeting.